Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Hello again, St. Lucia, and thank you for joining us on the program Agriculture on the Move. I am Philip Sidney, your host. I'm sure you have heard the name pesticides, and you may not be aware of the intricacies of pesticides. With me today is Mr. Cletus Alexander, who is the Crop Protection Officer attached to the Department of Agriculture and more so to the Research Division. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Sidney.
But let us, this information, I mean, it is timely, but I cannot emphasize or overemphasize the need for having such a program as a reminder maybe twice or three times a year, because it is so important that people know the use of pesticides. So just give the definition of a pesticide.
Basically, a pesticide is a synthetic as well as a natural substance used to control pests. As you said, it's not a matter of reminding people about pesticide use. But when I drive around, I see the way farmers are using pesticides in 2021. I wonder if it's a reminder or it's a revolution to educate farmers about the impacts of pesticides on the environment, animal health, and human health.
All right. Give us the dimensions of pesticides. I know there are various types of pesticides. Can you elucidate on that?
Well, pesticides, basically in agriculture, we have the fungicides to control fungus. We have the bactericides to control bacteria. We have herbicides to control weeds. We have molluscicides to control mollusks. We have acaricides to control mites and so on.
So that's the
basically
breakdown.
The broad.
Okay. But farmers are using pesticides at various levels, depending on whether it's an insecticide or fungicide. How is that guarded? In other words, you just cannot go out there and just use a pesticide on a crop. Is there a way, that a system that is being given to the farmers to guide him how to use those pesticides?
Well, if you have a problem with insects, you cannot use an insecticide. If you have a problem with bacteria, you cannot use a herbicide trying to control bacteria. But what you have to understand is this: the whole pesticide use is an age-old practice. Even before Jesus Christ was born, persons were using pesticides. But that pesticide they were using, it was natural. But from, as I said, before Christ was born up to 1942, pesticides were organic. They could have been considered as organic. But from 1942, when we had World War II, that was the genesis of the problem, what we call the highly hazardous pesticides, the use of toxic chemicals in agriculture. That was the genesis of it, the Second World War.
And that's what they used DDT during the war in Vietnam.
Yes, because what we have to understand as well, DDT was manufactured for use by the US Army in 1942 during the Second World War. And since then, the commercialization of pesticides began. Now, what we have to understand is this. We take pesticides for granted. Some of the pesticides that we are using were used in wars. They are nerve agents. They are very toxic chemical. And to make it worse, we have what is called the indiscriminate use of the pesticides. We have farmers who cannot read and write, yet you give them some of the most toxic chemicals you can think of, chemicals that can kill and so on. You have some of the persons working in the agricultural shops. They know nothing about some of the active ingredients that they are giving to the farmers to control certain pests and diseases.
Yeah. This is scary, right, as we speak about it, but we need to let people know that those chemicals that were hazardous in those days, I think they are banned now, right?
Well, we have what is, as I said, from 1942, we had the birth of what is called highly hazardous pesticides, the toxic chemicals in agriculture. But a lot of countries now have placed restrictions. There have been some of those pesticides, they have been prohibited, and some of them are banned in some of those countries. Now, what is happening is this. Because of poor pesticide legislation in Africa and the Caribbean and so on, you have lots of pesticides banned in some of those countries. They are still being used in the Caribbean and Africa. So it's a serious problem. Pesticide registration is a process, and pesticide registration in St. Lucia, the Caribbean, and Africa, maybe, we have to strengthen pesticide laws.
So are you saying there are chemicals that are banned in the first world countries and they're still using St. Lucia?
Yes, they are quite, well, let me put it this way. Even though a chemical is banned in a first world country, it doesn't mean automatically that you going to ban it. You need information, you need peer review papers. Because when you register a pesticide, you register the pesticide based on the information available at the time. But what is happening? Because of you have brighter, what I consider to be bright scientists now, new technologies, they are able to, those pesticides that were registered in the 1980s, in the 1990s, they have been re-evaluated. So you have persons now with new technology, pesticides that were considered safe probably 20 years ago, now they are classified as highly hazardous pesticides. And highly hazardous pesticides, these are the pesticides that will cause irreversible harm. Sometimes if they get into your, I think for example your eyes and so on, it may cause eye damage that cannot be reversed even by the best eye specialists. So we need to be careful. We need to guard against what is called the indiscriminate use of pesticides, not only in St. Lucia, but on a global scale, because indiscriminate use of pesticide, even though the pesticide is not used in St. Lucia, it can still have an impact on us in St. Lucia because we do a lot of importation of foods and so on.
Right. And the residue can remain on the food.
Yes, pesticide residue. Yeah. As we know, in last year around November, a number of shipments of bananas were rejected in the EU. Having warned the banana companies that those chemicals, they have a specific date for banning them, and the banana companies continued. These two pesticides, the chlorpyrifos and the imazalil.
That's in the blue diaphragm.
Well, the chlorpyrifos is in the blue diaphragm, but you also have some soil insecticides containing imazalil. Now, not imazalil, sorry, chlorpyrifos. The chlorpyrifos is a post-harvest fungicide used to wash the bananas for crown rot.
Right.
Now, for chlorpyrifos, research is showing that there is no safe limit for chlorpyrifos. And it has been classified as a highly hazardous pesticide. Now, for the imazalil, the research conducted is indicating that it may be a cancer-causing product. So that is why the EU had to ban imazalil. Even at the board level in St. Lucia, we took some action against imazalil and chlorpyrifos. But as I said, we have a number of highly hazardous pesticides on the pesticide list in St. Lucia.
But there's a typical example in Martinique, right? People are seeing the results, the negative results of the use of a particular chemical they use in bananas across there.
Yes,
and they're still using it, eh?
No, that was chlordicone.
Chlordicone, yeah.
And research is showing that the problem with chlordicone, 5 to 10% of prostate cancer death in Martinique can be linked to chlordicone poisoning.
Yeah.
The entire fishery in Martinique is compromised, because when the French president visited Martinique, he called it an environmental disaster. Because chlorpyrifos, imagine, it was since the 1950s and so on, it was used in banana production. Because some of those chemicals, the half-life of the chemicals, some of those chemicals, we taking it for granted.
They stay in the soil.
In excess of 100 years.
Yes.
It's about 50 years.
Yes.
So it means 50 years after you use some of those chemicals, we can still have those chemicals.
So in other words,
the soil.
if you decide, okay, you're not planting bananas on that said soil where it was grown, and you grow, say, vegetables there, you're still in problems.
Well, as I said, it's in the soil, so
Yeah.
it may
The
not
residue.
affect the vegetable per se, but you have certain vegetables that can absorb some of the chemicals in the soil,
Right.
especially cabbage and so on.
But there
And
were some nematicides that were banned here, like fimazone and nimagon some years ago.
Yes, furadon, that is a group of chemical called the carbamates.
Yes, the
Because
carbamates.
sand, as I said, it's a progression. When they, after the 1940s, the DDTs, the organochlorines,
Right.
scientists realized they had a problem with them. They moved to what is called the organophosphates.
Right.
Now, from the organophosphates, they moved to the carbamates. The carbamates, they are similar to the organophosphates. In an effort to get safer chemicals, you understand, you're moving from one group to the next. And now we have the most recent is the neon icotinoids that are very toxic to bees and so on. And a number of countries are banning neon icotinoids. So you can see the progression. Science, as I said, is continuous. Science is not an ethical thing as people believe, because science is based on the information available at the time.
Right.
What was wisdom 20 years ago? The younger generation now, to them, that's junk, because of the amount of technologies that are available to them and they're using and so on. So that
But
is
the advocate now really, Cletus, is to the use of safe chemicals.
Well,
especially looking at the organic chemicals.
Well, no chemical is safe.
Yes, true, I understand.
And the problem with the organic chemicals, yes, we tend to, presently, the highly hazardous pesticides, we need to look for alternatives. We need to move away from them. But you cannot overnight move away.
Yeah.
You have to, what is called, even at the regional level, there is much research done by an organization called the PAN UK, and they identify most of the highly hazardous pesticides in the Caribbean. And they have a risk reduction plan for those pesticides. Yes, we are saying the use of alternatives, and we are pointing to the more environmentally friendly pesticides,
ones,
the
yes.
biopesticides. But there are issues with biopesticides in terms of cost. They are very expensive. Time. Some of them take a long time. Whereby you can use a pesticide, some of the synthetic pesticides, within days you can see results.
Right.
But with some of the biopesticides, it will take probably a year, months before you can see the result. And again, biopesticides, they are still at the research stage. There are lots of unknowns about them.
Okay. As you mentioned, the expensiveness of those chemicals, one of the problems that farmers face because of cost of production, they are not using the right rates of chemicals. They would use less. Why some of them will use more because they want to see a quick fix. But some of them want to save money, and so instead of using 1 tablespoon per gallon, they probably use half a tablespoon per gallon. Any comments on that?
Well, it's not a matter of saving money. Yes, while you may save some dollars by using less chemicals, but on the long run, you are causing a major issue.
Yeah.
That is pesticide resistance. Because on the pesticide label, the rate at which the pesticide should be applied is on the label. Now, if you use less, it means you're going to apply the pesticide on whatever pest that you're trying to control. Now, when applying pesticide, there are two things. One, some will be sensitive. Some, that is, those that will be affected. And you have some that will not. So, for example, if you do not use the correct rate, it may not control the insect. Now, by doing that, the insect is not controlled. All the time you getting exposure to the pesticide, and in the long run, it is not going to control the pesticide. So, while trying to save money, you may find yourself the cost of the production. Yes, because you will end up using more pesticides than necessary.
Give a rundown of how a farmer should use pesticides on his farm, be it insecticide, fungicides, weedicides? What are the prerequisites?
Well, I always believe, first of all, before you decide to use a pesticide, the most important thing is to have an understanding of the active ingredient in the pesticide, because all pesticides consist of an active ingredient and what is called the inert ingredient.
Hold that point, because that is very important. We're due for our first break. Well, our only break. You're watching Agriculture on the Move. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon.
Banana farmers, remember me? I destroyed the Gros Michel banana variety some years ago. Now, my cousin, Tropical Race 4 or TR4, a Fusarium wilt banana disease, is on the horizon in a more aggressive form and can wipe out the banana industry in a flash. Be vigilant. Don't bring any banana plants or plant tissue into the island. Report any unusual symptoms on your banana plots to the Department of Agriculture at telephone 468-5600 or the extension officer in your area. Remember, protect our vital banana industry.
Welcome back to the program. And of course, if you're just following, we are discussing pesticides, the use stage of pesticides by the farmer and of course by extension the public at large. And of course with me is Mr. Cletus Alexander, who is a crop protection officer attached to the crop protection division in the Department of Agriculture. We were talking about the active ingredients in the chemicals. So, and not only that, but how should the farmers prepare themselves in the use of pesticides?
Okay. As I said, first of all, if you're going to use pesticide, you have to know what stage the crop is in. Whether you're close to harvesting or you just establishing the crop. That is key. Mm-hmm. Because as I said, the ingredient that you're going to use, some of the active ingredients in the pesticide can stay in the soil for months. It means a pesticide that you use probably today, say for example, the half-life of the pesticide is 3 months. You establish the crop, you use the pesticide. Now that pesticide is going to stay in that soil for 3 months. The farmers will not, on most occasions, they will not know this, but the pesticide will stay in the soil some of them will stay in the soil for a very long time. So if you have a problem with watermelon, take for example, you have a watermelon problem. The watermelon is at flowering stage. You cannot use Caprid on that or protector. I see a lot of farmers are doing this. You cannot use Caprid or protector on the crop at flowering stage. There are some countries.
Are they systemic or the contact?
Well, they are systemic, double systemic.
Whoa.
Now the point is this, also they are translaminar, but the point is this. They are very toxic to bees. And you know bees at flowering, they will come to these chemicals, they accumulate in the pollen and the nectar of the plant. Now these chemicals, I just use the neonicotinoids and I use the Caprid and the protector as an example. Right. So if you're going to apply Caprid to a watermelon crop at flowering, knowing that the Caprid, that active ingredient, the neonicotinoids, that group, they're going to stay in the soil in excess of 6 weeks. They're going to accumulate in the pollen and the nectar of the plant. It means, well, a watermelon crop at flowering will not stay in the soil for 6 weeks. Right. It means the level of exposure is very high because the chemical will still be in the plant. Persons have to consume.
So the farmer need guidance in that regard.
The farmer, well, as I said, the problem with pesticide use in St. Lucia, indiscriminate pesticide use, there are 2 major problems there. You have one, as I said, a farmer who cannot read and write. Yes. He cannot understand the label. Plus, he has a problem, he will run to the agribusinessman for a pesticide. Now that agribusinessman has no information about the active ingredient. He will tell the farmer, use Vidate, use this, use that. But does he understand how the active ingredient is working? Yes. Because there's a trick in the pesticide. You have the active ingredient and you have what is called the inert ingredient. Yes. Now with the inert ingredient, that is a trade secret.
Right.
The manufacturer will tell you what the active ingredient
But
is.
not the inert
but
ingredient.
they will not tell you what the inert ingredient is. Now, the inert ingredient may be more toxic than the pesticide itself. But you as a registrar, you cannot decide whether you're in a bind because you don't know what the inert ingredients in the pesticides are.
Right.
So that's why it is very important that you use pesticides wisely.
And you know, you brought up a point about a farmer he has a problem in his crop, and he goes not to the extension officer, but he goes to one of the distributors, and he would explain his problem. I remember once entering a business place, and what the farmer was explaining was an insect problem, and you know, the guy recommended a fungicide for him.
Well,
and I had to intervene because, I mean, you and I know using the fungicide on an insect will not work.
No.
So he's spending his money uselessly. So that's why it's, you know, farmers need to be mindful. If you have a problem, check and contact your extension officer for more information.
Not that alone. Yes, it may be an insect problem, but is it a biting insect?
Yes.
Is it a sucking insect?
Yes, yes.
So,
yes,
as I said,
yes.
the problem is bigger than what we think.
Exactly.
It has to do with the farmer himself, the extension officers as well, because what I'm observing is that extension officers too, they need to be trained on some of the active ingredients.
And they need to be updated on the new chemicals that are coming on the market.
Right, that is another
That's
issue.
another issue.
Right.
Yes, yes, yes,
So-
yes. The other thing is, okay, that said, in terms of protectiveness of the farmer himself in applying the chemicals, what should he do? What should you do to prepare himself for spraying his crops?
Well, first of all, the equipment that you're going to use is very important. The pressure of the equipment is also important.
Correct.
What I see farmers are doing out there, take for example, you have Vidit, a chemical that is being used, a banned chemical, a highly toxic pesticide,
it is still being used?
HHP. Yes, it is. You have farmers now, when Vidit was registered, a requirement was that for the registration, you must have the right equipment for the farmer to apply the pesticide. You were supposed to use Vidit with a Vidit gun. Every shot would be 7.5 ml. But what you have now, farmers are diluting the pesticide in the knapsack sprayer, which was not
supposed to
it
be
was not
that way.
supposed to happen. So you find pesticide use in St. Lucia, farmers are not adhering to the pesticide label. They cannot read, they cannot write, and they believe if probably the extension officer tell them use 5 ml, if 5 ml can control the pest, they believe probably 10 ml will eradicate the problem. But it will not.
Yes.
We have to guard against this thing. The indiscriminate use of pesticide is not in St. Lucia alone. It is a regional problem. It is a global problem as well.
Right.
Indiscriminate use of pesticide. A scientist putting a pesticide in a bottle. This is not wrong. But it will have an impact, a greater impact, if you do not use the pesticide as recommended, which is what we call the indiscriminate use of the pesticide. That is where the issue is.
Right.
And that is where the level of the education, that is where you have to educate the farmer.
Yeah. And the problem you have to, farmers don't know if you apply that particular insecticide at a higher dose, it can affect the plant. It's phytotoxic.
Yes, again, while pesticide, mind you, pesticide use, there are benefits to pesticide use, because as we saw in the 1960s, a lot of countries started using pesticides. They were able to increase food production. A number of countries where you had hunger and stuff, a lot of persons were able, because of the increase in production,
Right.
after using pesticide, they were able to feed the population. But the problem we are getting with pesticide use is that pesticide use will only accrue to the farmer. The farmer using the pesticide on his crop, he's the one making the profit,
Right.
because he controls the pest, he's going to sell more, but the community is going to be at risk, because him not using the pesticide as recommended, he's going to pollute the waterway, he's going to pollute the atmosphere. Probably a lot is going to happen to nature.
Yeah.
So,
and by extension now you have pre-larceny.
right, so
It's a big problem.
A food security,
It's a food security issue. Exactly.
The farmer spraying now, and somebody come and harvest,
Yep.
sell to the public. You're going to, well,
especially leafy vegetables.
Yeah, compromise food security.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that takes me to the next issue in terms of farmers using chemicals. They want to bring in chemicals, or even the persons who are selling chemicals. I know there's a board. Tell us about the duties of the pesticide board.
Well, the pesticide board is the regulator of pesticides in St. Lucia. The pesticide board is responsible for pesticide registration, the issuing of the import permits. But sadly to say that the pesticide board is not involved in the life cycle management of the pesticides. By that I mean registration, use, and disposal. So the pesticide board merely deals with pesticide importation and registration.
Okay.
But as you can see out there, you have a serious problem with disposal of pesticide. Even the pesticide containers, you have a problem with that. Monitoring to make sure that the farmers are using those pesticides properly. It's an issue out there.
Traceability, we need. I don't want to frighten our consumers out there, because that's one of the issues. I know a lot of the consumers here who are consuming, our vegetables are concerned with chemicals in the food that they consume. Can you, at least appease their minds as to what the best way to ensure that you do not have residue? I mean, right now we have the Diagnostic Laboratory Union. I think they're equipped now to probably, I was told, to look at traceability. Yeah. I know the marketing board, there's a pack house, and there is some measure of traceability there too, because you want a wholesome a commodity to be sold to the consumer, and they must have faith in what is being produced, comrade.
Okay, right. Key to this process is this: good agricultural practices.
Beautiful.
But even though you have a lab to test the MRL, the point is the lab will not test every produce out there. And you may find yourself in a situation where, yes, it is tested, but is it after the fact?
Mm-hmm.
You go by the market, you take a couple of produce, you test, and you realize, well, the MRL is very high, they use whatever pesticide. But remember, some persons have already consumed
That's right.
the product.
Yes.
It is a start. But as I said, key is addressing the issue of indiscriminate use of pesticides. And we have to put in place good programs for farmer. You have to some of the farms, you have to farmer certification, good education, follow some good modules in terms of good agricultural practices. And then I'll say, well, the process can be safer.
Part of the good agricultural practices is how the farmer protects himself from when he's spraying. I know. Let's look at the gear. Tell us what is required.
Okay. Yes. In terms of PPE, that is a serious issue, because the problem is this. Some of the PPEs that we have, by that I mean the gloves, the caps, and the suit, and so on, the rubber boots, some of them were not manufactured for tropical conditions.
Okay.
And the farmers tend to complain that it's when they have the
hot.
PPE, it's hot, and so on.
Yes.
But that is the only way to mitigate the impact of some of those pesticides. Yes, you can. I mean, using a pesticide, as I said, I was using warfare, a nerve agent. It's better to feel hot for an hour or two than to kill yourself. Yeah, over the long run, you get cancer.
So the use of gear is important.
Very important.
As we come, because we don't have much time left. Final words from you?
Well, final words. We have to ask the farmer, why in 2021 you have farmers using pesticides without protective equipment?
Mm-hmm.
And number one, why are we using pesticides? There are a lot of farmers who believe, well, they use pesticides to kill the pest. You will not kill the pest. You can use all the pesticides you can get in the way. You will not kill the pest. The same weed that you spray, a couple of weeks, it will be there. Yeah. And remember this, we use pesticides to repel the insect. As a deterrent,
that's right.
We use pesticides to control Then say because the population may be high, and then you decide to use a pesticide to knock it down.
Okay.
And then you use the pesticide to control. Farmers, remember this. Right. You will never kill the pesticide by using the chemical. Yeah. Trust me. Yeah. You can buy free, because globally we're using 5.2 billion gallons of pesticides. A farmer, you can use all that pesticide and will not kill the pest. Trust me.
Well, thank you, comrade, for being here. I wish you success in the continued fight to ensure that the farmers do it right. Thank you again for being with us. You've been watching Agriculture on the Move. I want to thank you for viewing the program. I'm hoping that this was an informative program for you, the consumer and the producer. Agriculture is our business. Eat fresh. Lucia's best. Say so new. I'm Philip Sidney. Goodbye.
Probably for pest.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.